And thank you very much for tuning in for my next entry. This is Hawkeye. You are in the Hawkeye's House of Horrors, and I'm going to bring to you my next review. But I'll get to that in a moment because I just wanted to say at this point now, I have 10 subscribers on my Facebook channel. So if you like what you see, enjoy the videos, what have you, subscribe, like, make a comment, anything you want to do in this video or any others. But today I'm going to bring the remake uh, of Friday the 13th and talk about that film. Um, I did a review for the original Friday the 13th. It was in my within my list of horror films of 1980 worth seeing. So I'm going to do the remake at this point. Um, and I gotta say, I've seen it a couple times now. I even went out and bought the DVD of the film. It's the killer cut. So I think there's additional uh, length time to the film, I believe. So I went out and I bought it because I actually enjoy it. It was way better than I was expecting. I think that's because I had such a low expectation of the film. Why, you may ask? Well, because at some point, and I'm going to get to it, within the Friday the 13th series, uh, it just went downhill and kind of stayed there, in my opinion. So at this point, I'd seen all the films before it. Uh, they all weren't bad or horrible once we get to the point of, okay, this isn't a good Friday the 13th film, but most of them were. So my expectations were rather low. And I watched it and I was surprised. I really enjoyed it, and it is on the list of Friday the 13th films worth seeing. Um, Now, I think this film may have been a little polarizing because I think some people hate it, and some people actually may think of it as their favorite, or this has their favorite Jason of all the Friday the 13th films. So it was released on Tuesday the 13th. That was close, but not close enough, but it was close. It was released on February the 13th, 2009 in the United States. That makes this film 15 years old. Man, does time fly. It doesn't feel like this movie is that old or should be that old, but there it is. It's that old of a film. Now, next I'm going to say this film has got a lot of boobs in it. So if you're looking for some of that, this film will bring it to you. But there's a lot of that in this film, and this isn't the only Friday the 13th film that would be guilty of that as well. Now, this film was directed by Marcus Nispel. Now, Nispel had directed some other films, and it's interesting because he made remakes. He did the remake to Texas Chainsaw Massacre as well as Conan the Barbarian. Now, the story to the film is by Damian Shannon, Mark Swift, and Mark Wheaton. Now, Shannon and Swift had actually wrote Freddy vs. Jason, which I'm definitely going to review at some point. I need to see it again. A buddy I work with actually gave me the film, so I'm going to watch it um, at some point and give a review, hopefully soon enough. But I need to see it again. I really enjoyed the third act to that film. Once that battle happens, I think a problem I had, I was just wanting it to happen. Come on, come on, come on, get to it. So I think maybe on my next viewing, I'll be more prepared to enjoy the rest of the film, perhaps. Now, this film had a budget of 19 million bucks back in 2009. So in today's money, That would be 27.3 million bucks. That's a pretty good budget in terms of Friday the 13th films, I do believe. Now, this flick, it was huge at the box office. I'm going to say it made 97.3 million, or just under 133.3 million dollars. Um, in comparison to the 27.3 million dollar budget, I think that's great. They knocked it out of the ballpark. I guess people really did want to see a Friday the 13th film, and they went into the theaters and saw it. Now, I'm going to go through at this point the story and the characters in the film. Start there and get into some other things about the film as well. Now, the credit sequence in the film, it actually sets up the rest of the film, um, and it shows Jason's mother. She's gone in, killed a bunch of counselors, much like in the original film, um, and it's set back. I think it says right on the screen back in 1980 as well at Camp Crystal Lake. So there's Friday the 13th, Part One, right there. Now, as the movie goes on, it is also a remake of Part Two, Part Three, and I'm going to say Part Four as well. The first four Friday the 13th films are all in here. Now, she battles, I forget her name. I apologize, but she battles this counselor and she cuts her head off, just like in the original film. And then Jason comes out immediately to her dead body, finding his mother, and then he must take vengeance. You just got to give him time. He's got to grow up first before he takes the vengeance. Um, I'm not sure if they go over this either. I don't know where he goes at that point because he's just a kid. Where he goes at this point to then become the man Jason at the in the next scene that happens. So as we get right into the film, right out of the gates, um, I see, to me anyway, story wise, it may not outdo the original films, and that was definitely one of its weaker elements was the story or how things add up. Um, and unfortunately, in the end, it's very much a Friday the 13th film, and it fails in that department. But anyways, in the next scene, and this I actually like. We are introduced to a bunch of stoners who are looking for weed that has been planted in the bush near, guess where? Camp Crystal Lake or Camp Blood. So they're looking for this weed, this to get and make a bunch of money on. Um, but these characters are really just total fodder. Uh, they're just set up to be victims of Jason. And other Friday the 13th films did this as well, and some definitely more so than others. One that comes to my mind immediately that sets up its characters like that is Friday the 13th, Part 7. Um, that one set up the characters like that, and I thought the characters in that were terrible. Um, that was an absolute weak point to that film, and really brought that film down. It works much better in this film, but all of the characters are just set up. Well, not all of them, actually. I'm going to get into the good ones, but most of the characters are set up like that. And these characters that were introduced to the adult Jason, they are just set up to be that, just to be victims of him. Now, as I read, Shannon and Swift wanted to make the dialogue in the film more normal. Um, but at the same time, in my opinion, it becomes a bit of a two-edged sword. Sometimes it is quite funny, um, and at other times, um, you'll hear me use this term a lot about the characters, and that is douchebags. Not all of us are douchebags. And while and sometimes the dialogue can be funny, at other times it can be quite annoying and may in fact hurt the character by its delivery or by who the character is that the writers are bringing for you to see. Now, as I mentioned earlier, they're not all bad or they're not all set up to be victims, um, but in my opinion, it works much better in creating good, well written characters that the audience can care about, rather than dinks or douchebags you just want to see die. And maybe out there, hey, maybe absolutely there's got to be some people out there that, no, actually, that's what I want to see. I want to see characters I don't care about so that, I'm disconnected from them as Jason takes carnage out on them. And that's fine because you're going to get that in this film. If that's really what you want, you're going to get that here. But I think, in my opinion, who I am as a viewer, or what I enjoy more in my horror films, are characters that I care about or have. It also leads to creating sympathy or cheering for the villain, rather than perhaps having fear um, of that character and watching them as well. Jason has a reputation of being a total killing machine, being afraid of that. And I would say this film, the fear is kind of amped up a little bit, like in comparison to some of the other Friday the 13th films, where, you know, how many times do you need to make a Friday the 13th film? Well, they ran that to the well many, 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 many times. But, anyways, of this group of stoners, the only one that you really need to worry about is Whitney. She's played by Amanda Rigetti. She's pretty. She becomes the survivor of the group. Um, in my opinion, more or less due to Jason's idiocy. She also becomes like Ginny from part two, in her communicating with Jason or her having an interest perhaps in getting a deeper look into Jason. That is taken from part two. The other character I'm going to mention from the group is Wade, played by Jonathan Sadowski. To me, his character, woohoo, caught it. Um, I found his character, he is pretty much a wiener. He thinks he knows everything, but that's okay because he's not around for very long. And yeah, his death is a bad one, for sure. But I do think it's kind of cool. He does make a reference to Spaceballs and the Schwartz. So, well, that's cool though. Like, so, whatever. With this opening sequence, you're then introduced to Jason once you meet all these characters. He then starts knocking them off left, right, and center in quick succession, too. Um, Personally, I would have totally got rid of that opening sequence and just started with this. I'm not saying take a Jason's mother, but maybe it would be best to put her at the end of the film. Um, Maybe more of like a Friday the 13th Part Two. That's where the mother showed up, or even of course like the original Friday the 13th. But I think that would have been a better way to do it. It doesn't hurt the film, the opening sequence. It just doesn't really do anything for me because then Wade shows up and starts telling everybody over the campfire the story of Jason, the story of Jason's mother. Why do I need to see that opening sequence? Because I don't think you do. Because personally, I think this is a really good intro to Jason. And I would go as far as saying it's one of the best intros of A, Jason, or B, a Friday the 13th film, and would put it up there with Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives. I think it's a really good intro to his character, and it really leaves a lasting impression as well, that whole sequence, once he starts offing all of the victims. So then in steps the next group of victims who are going to take the rest of the film on. Um, the opening sequence, I don't know, what were they there, 10 minutes or something like that, but the next group, they're there for a very much longer period of time. So we have, I'm going to go through all the characters and my thoughts on each of them. So first, we have Trent, played by Travis Van Winkle. And I think his character, I didn't write it down, but I think his character is the same name he played in Transformers, I think. So I don't know, is that a reference or is this, yeah, I don't know, whatever. But anyways, his character, he is a total douchebag. Um, but you know what? I actually enjoy his character because he is such a douchebag, such a dick. And I personally, I think Van Winkle does a very good job in his performance because quite quickly you're telling yourself that, or you should be telling yourself that this guy is a douchebag. If he wasn't doing a very good job in his performance, I would be saying, "Wow, that's not a good performance." Um, Bad acting. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying, wow, I do not like him. I do not like this character, him himself. And along, he brings his gang of buddies. That's Bree, played by Juliana Gill. She's the sexy one. She just wants to have sex with Trent and get loaded like the rest of them. There's Chewie, played by Aaron Wu, and Lawrence, played by Arlen Escarpeta. Those two in particular are bad friends. I would not want to be friends with these guys. They're just there. They're going to Trent's parents' cottage. So like, okay, like let's not wreck the place, like. But anyways, these two they just want to get pissed up, get high. Now Lawrence turns everything racial, which I don't like about his character as well. And he seems to have a thing for ladies in winter fashion, I guess. And then Chewie, he just trashes everything, steals Trent's parents' liquor, and like he goes into like, is it the out to the shed? I think it was the shed, but he starts like trashing the shed bad, and that's where he seems happens to find his parents' liquor cabinet or whatever, and starts just drinking it, and it's like, oh man, I would not want to be friends with this guy here. Um, but anyways, Chewie though, I will say this, I half like him because I do think Aaron Wu is funny in the role. He's got some good lines, good delivery on it, funny. But man, his character, as I said, I would not want to be friends with either of those guys, but Chewie for sure, he would destroy the house. And then there's Nolan, played by Ryan Hansen, and Chelsea, played by Willa Ford. They are a couple as well, and they're extremely shallow, which you can say about all the other people as well. They're all shallow as well, very self-centered. Or now, finally, along with the gang as well, And you should notice quite quickly she doesn't really quite belong with them. She's actually a nice girl, and that is Jenna, played by Danielle Pennebaker. Um, yeah, as I said, you really don't think she belongs without. She's really hanging out with the wrong crowd. But really, she's just the hot college girl that Trent wanted to hook up with. And she's along, not so much along for the ride, but out for a party weekend at his parents' cottage and see how this goes. Um, and then another character as well. He isn't really in the gang, but he ends up certainly in the story or getting to know these people is Clay, played by Jared Padalecki, who is actually the brother of um, Whitney. He's a brother of Whitney. Sorry, just had to look at the other page. I'm like, what was her name again? Okay, there it is. Yeah, he is the brother of Whitney. And like Friday the 13th Part 4, he's looking for his sister. His sister has gone missing. So he's um, really on his motorbike looking for his sister, handing out flyers in the area where he knew she was going to be going. I actually like his character. It's one of the just like Jenna. I like his character. He's a bit of a loner as well. Um, he may have that look of being the bad guy, but once you get to know him, he's a good guy. He's actually a guy I would sit down and have a beer with, have a conversation, get to know him. And hey, he might be a guy I might want to hang out with. He's a good character. I like him. And I wrote this down because I don't know if anybody out there knows. Hey, pop a line in the comments. I'm not sure. But his character's last name, much like his sister Whitney, is Miller. And my thought is that because the writer of the original Friday the 13th was Victor Miller, so this character or those two characters get the last name Miller. That's my thought. I don't know if that is the case. Now, the look to Jason, um, I think it's pretty cool, but it's inspired by, or it's a combination of Carl Fullerton's from Friday the 13th Part 2 um, and Tom Savini from Friday the 13th, the final chapter, or part 4. They are very different looking Jasons. Like part 2, he's much more of like a guy in the woods look, and in part 4, he's now got the hockey mask. He didn't have that in part 2. Um, so it's a very different look, but he's combined it to give that look, and that's by Scott Stoddard, who did the look for Jason. And he also went on to work on Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which Nispel also directed. And he also did work on The Mandalorian, which was a Star Wars show, I believe, on Netflix. I really enjoyed that. But yeah, he also worked on that as well. Now, Jason is played by Derek Mears. Big man, as he should be if you're going to play Jason. But I'm going to say it. He only played him once. The other two guys in my list, they only played him once as well. But I'm going to put him in my top 3 Jasons because I like it. He comes across foreboding, very scary looking. Not a guy you'd want to mess with. He's got the look, and I think he does a good job. Now, with his portrayal of Jason, there are some very different things, and I say go for it because, hey, if I want to see what I wanted to see before, I can just watch those movies again, right? But this is got to be the quickest Jason. He's very fast, very quick. Um, so I like that. Whereas by part 6, he was like a zombie. He never ran. He had a strong stride, I guess, going through chasing his victims, but it was I think originally a very funny joke that then became that's how Jason kills you, which whatever. But so also with the look of Jason, at the beginning of the film, he's wearing a sheet over his head like he did in part two. But then he gets the goalie mask or the hockey goalie mask, like he got in part three. And then he puts it on and wears it for the remainder of the film. He may be wearing the sheet over his head for maybe the first quarter of the film, I'm going to guess, which is good enough. It was long enough, but not too long, because everyone associates, at least I think they do, the hockey mask with Jason, and he wears it for most of the film. Now, within the death scenes as well, I mean, it's 2009 now. It's not 1989 or 1980 anymore. So there's some visual effects being used in the death scenes, and at times it can be obvious or a little obvious. Um, must say it doesn't really hurt any of the kills, the effects that are being used, so that's fine. I'm fine with that there. But to me, the kills, even as I sit here now, like um, I would absolutely. This is one of the more graphic Friday the 13th films. I still think maybe Jason Goes to Hell, because it's not only to go with high gore, it's kind of bonkers. Um, but this is definitely one of the more gory Friday the 13th films. And sitting down to watch this film, I was expecting that on my initial viewing. I was expecting, okay, this is going to be graphic. And yes, it is. The kills are graphic. Um, but the kills don't, the kills aren't, in my mind, up to the level of within the original, within the film, within the first four films that this is being a remake of. The kills in this film aren't up to that level to me, especially part four, the final chapter. It just had some great memorable kills in that. Now I'm not saying the kills in this are bad. Um, I, for example, I'll go through my favorite ones and why I like them. Um, there's Chelsea. She's in the water and Jason stabs her in the head. She's under like the dock, stabs her in the head and like lifts her up out of the water. It's really silly but graphic, so that works. Chewy, to me, this is more the more kind of classic Friday the 13th kill to me. It's pretty gruesome death, though, too. And then Trent, because he's such a douchebag, such a dickweed, and it's fairly gruesome. Now, with Jason, problems I had with Jason, and I'm not going to go into like 10 minutes of talking about it. I'm just going to say, uh, would Jason kidnap a victim and keep him or her? No, no, he wouldn't. He would kill him. That's what Jason would do. Would Jason set up booby traps? No, no, he wouldn't. He would just chase you with a machete or some sort of weapon and then kill you. That's what Jason would do. Um, I thought because of these things, it was too much like Texas Chainsaw Massacre because Leatherface wouldn't quite do that. Leatherface was there for the kill, but the Sawyer family would kidnap you, set up booby traps, do all these things. Jason wouldn't do that. He was a killer. That's what Jason was. Um, Now, he kidnapped Amanda in the film because she looked like his mother. He then kept her, chained her up. So obviously, he knew she is not his mother, but I'm going to keep you because you look like my mother, and then treat you like a slave, really. Um, Now, the writers try and have it make sense, but for me, it doesn't quite add up enough for all these silly things that a cold, calculated killer would do. They wouldn't do these things um, when, in my opinion, you can go ahead, you can change certain things about the character, but to me, Jason was and it's works and it's effective, but he was in the most simple way, he was a killer. He would go and kill you, much like my thoughts on Michael Myers. He would do the same thing. Um, so yeah, it adds too much, as I wrote down. It adds too much cunning, or there's too much cunning added to his kills for it to really work for me. But the kill of Jenna at the end, nearing the end of the film, was surprising. I liked it. It added to the film, um, and it was a much added boost to the film as we near the end of the film. It really worked for me very well. Um, Now, the end of the film, uh, I wrote down Jason comes out of the lake, um, which to me, why don't you've killed Jason? Why don't you just call the cops um, so that they can deal with all this stuff, or so they're aware of everything going on here? But they put him in the lake, um, much like they did in the end of like Jason Lives and New Blood. Um, yeah. Anyways, but he comes out of the lake and he attacks Whitney. But really, does he just kidnap her again? That would kind of make sense to me. Um, Clay would be dead. Sorry. But it wasn't the first time she escaped. She escaped before. He didn't kill her. He just kidnapped her and put her back down in chains. So would he do that again? I don't see why not. I guess I don't know. Now the music to the film was done by Steve Jablonsky. He also did, interestingly as well, remakes as well. So he did Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He also did the music to A Nightmare on Elm Street, the remake, and the remake to the Amityville Horror. For some reason, I'm having difficulty speaking here. Um, Now, the music is okay. It really turns up and goes for it when the horror is happening, which is good. Um, it's a plus to the music that it's there and amping things up when needed. But to me, the score is nowhere as good as the original score that was done by Harry Manfredini. Um, I think it was certainly much more effective, but as I said, it's okay and it does its job. Now, as I said, this thing, I think it did really well at the box office. The end of the film is setting up for a sequel, and they were setting it up. We're just going to punch out some more sequels and just remake some, redo this Friday the 13th. But after that, nothing happened. Didn't lead to a sequel. They were going to make one supposedly, but it got canned. I don't know if it was the feedback they received for the film or what it was because I think it was Paramount and New Line Cinema were both involved with this film, and they must have liked the returns they got out of it, but for some reason, no sequel was ever made. But anyways, that's my review for Friday the 13th, and I'm gonna say you should go out and see it. Now, I would definitely start off with the originals. I would even say start off with 1 through 4 those ones, and then if you want to, you can jump in and see the remake. Or hey, if you wanna, if you're that far into Friday the 13th, why don't you just keep watching them all, right? Just watch them all and then get to the remake. But I really like this remake, and apologies to anybody out there who hates this film. I liked it, but anyways, that was a blast. Can't wait. But anyways, peace out. Have yourself an excellent day, and that's that.